Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and today is Tuesday, October 26th. So, theme of the day that I've got here is Turnaround Tuesday. I'll explain that in a second. Risk disclaimer first. Everything that we're going through here is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. The whole risk disclaimer is there. Also, if the screen is a little bit blurry, it's just because YouTube takes a while to render the high definition version of the video. Just give it a little bit more time. So, Turnaround Tuesday, what does that mean? Well, usually we use that phrase when the market has been kind of choppy and kind of like or there's been a little bit of a dip in the market like we saw in September, and then coming into after like a poor Monday, then we would kind of look for the market to kind of turn around. Some that happens a lot when the market's in those circumstances on Tuesdays. Today was a little bit different. It was a turnaround, kind of felt like a turnaround day to the downside after we've had a really nice run in the market. I think some digestion. I've kind of been saying that for the last couple days that I thought some digestion was in order for the overall indices. We've been running pretty hot. The sentiment is hot. We've seen a lot of these momentum names. There could be a story out on one name and it just rallies and rallies and rallies. There's a lot of momentum in this market, so I think it helps a little bit to see some volatility to kind of shake the trees a little bit and get some of that really really bubbly sentiment out of the market a little bit so that we don't get like a blow off top or anything like that. But I think we're going to have days like this, going forward, where that's just the case after we've had a nice run, and eventually we're going to see a little bit of a turnaround day in digestion, and maybe a check back into support. Right, those are all things that are kind of normal in a market. It's not all that normal for us just to continue on one direction higher, especially with a week that we have like this with earnings season, where 30% of the S&P and the NASDAQ report in terms of number of companies. So even though I'm calling it, that's what I'm calling it for the day, because some names started the day positive and finished red, especially when you look at the market breadth over here, which we're going to get into. But that's kind of what it felt like. Even though the S&P was up 10 basis points, the Qs finished up 30 basis points. Small caps, continue to kind of be two steps forward, one step back, down 0.75%. They sold off the most, along with those micro caps. We could look at a couple of these charts, and then one other noticeable thing here was the VIX, which was up about 5% today. At one point, we touched almost a 17. We got to about 1670, which was around midday today, around 12, a little past 12:30, and that kind of backed off the afternoon, and we finished right around 16. So a little bit of an increase in volatility for the day. Let's get into some of the index charts, right? Well, there's not much, I think I said this in yesterday's video that, there's not, I don't really want to spend too much time here. Price action is above all the short-term moving averages. We have broken out, and we're holding the 5-period moving average, so the trend is higher. But yes, a bit of an ugly looking candle for the day, right? That's not the best candle. So I would watch the 5-period moving average and see if price starts to duck under there. If not, it's just an ugly candle, right? Keep in mind when you're looking at candlestick patterns, 3 candles make a pattern, not just one. So even though we see some ugly patterns, or excuse me, ugly candles, like oil was a good example of one yesterday too. I didn't really like that candle yesterday. We tried to go higher, came back in, right, and closed right around the open, right? So ugly, right? Explored this higher level, couldn't do it. However, right, one candle is not a pattern, and even though this, in my opinion, was an ugly candle, oil held the trend, held the 5-period moving average quite nicely, and is continuing to trend. So you see that from time to time. Even though I think this S&P candle is a little bit uglier looking, I don't think it's the end of the world. Right? NASDAQ, we did actually hit some resistance today. Right, we talked about this in the pre-market session. As always, I always put for members all the index charts and on multiple time frames, 3 time frames: daily chart, 1-hour chart, and 5-minute chart. Right, because the daily chart has the value area for the month, right, which you can see we hit some resistance. 15,679. The 1-hour chart has the value area for the week, which we also took some resistance out there too. right? So some upside targets were hit, right? So it makes sense to me at this point to see a little bit of digestion, right? And we'll see if that can be, just because their VPOC has been taken out doesn't mean we have to turn back to the downside, even though you could see that we are about a good number of handles off the highs. So sometimes we do get a fade, sometimes we just get digestion. For now, I think you could chalk it up to digestion, and we'll see. Right. So level to watch for tomorrow will be this, resistance that I think is valid is this 15,679. All right. So this is using volume at price. That's how we come up with those levels. And then NASDAQ, sorry, not NASDAQ, small caps, again, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? So above yesterday's open, but not by far, and giving back a lot of those gains, right? So that's small caps. We'll look at IWC too, which is micro caps. They are trailing a little bit. So interesting, out of the mid caps, strongest, even though that's not the best looking candle either. Then small caps, right, and then the micro caps, right, which are still in value. No breakout there. All right, guys. So we could talk a little bit about sectors. Yesterday I highlighted about 3 or 4 sectors where we saw some strength. Not so much today, right? Transports, which the rails are just continuing to be one of the most, even though I don't think I mentioned them yesterday, they continue to be super strong. Right. So here's UNP, for example. The whole group is doing this. CSX. Right. We've talked about these a couple times. I don't know if I covered them yesterday, but very strong, and probably another group that's ready for a little bit of digestion after some big moves. All right. So that's kind of the word of this video is digestion, and I think that's quite normal. So what finished best for the day? The transports finished the best, utilities, and then you could see a lot of red. The Chinese internet's a lot of put buying going on in the Chinese internet names. Notice that they look like they're turning back down, right? So they did get back above the 50-day moving average, but I would watch this now for support. This is an area that we'd want to see hold. Don't really want to see a revisit of the lows. Maybe this could come down to this downside trend line. And see what we do down here, but still, this is really not what you want to see. Reminder that a lot of names that are in downtrends, they bounce and then they resume their downtrend. So have to be careful with this group. We'll keep an eye on what these Chinese internets do, but like I said, a lot of put buying going on within the group, within that ETF, not the group. All right, another group that was very strong yesterday, retail names, they were down 2%. Right, solar, clean energy was really strong yesterday. So there was, I think a lot of names were following what Tesla was doing. Might as well talk about this chart first. Hit a high of 1094. I think the RSI on this on the daily, I think I talked about this on the 1 hour, maybe this morning. The 1 hour RSI got to a 95, and I think it got to a similar level on the daily. What is this here? No, not 95, but it did get to a 90. That is really, really hot, and you could look by the price action all the way up to 1094. That's just an astounding move. So watch to see what this does. Remember, the breakout area for this is around 900. So if this comes in backing and filling, I think that would be great. That may set up for some trading opportunities to come, but I don't know if we're going to see it, but a move into back, a little bit below 1,000, I think would set up pretty nicely going forward for Tesla. But I think let it do what it wants to do. And overall with this market, it's kind of the theme that I have for this video too, is just be reasonable and realistic, right? It's tough, right? I was talking about this with members in the midday video, that it's tough when we see so many of these things moving, like this one last night, BKKT, right? It's tough not to get the FOMO, right? The fear of missing out, and also greed kind of takes control a little bit too, right? It's an emotion that we have to deal with all the time as traders. But I think if you stick to your process, and one of the things that I talked about today was, hey, go for a 5-minute walk, right? Get away from the screens a little bit, because it just seemed like things were getting a little bit too out of hand with the momentum carrying over from yesterday. So if you felt a little bit of that today, don't worry about it. It happens to everybody. And the best thing that you could do is kind of take a little bit of a break, go over your rules. If you have your rules written down or if you've got them some other place, make sure that you're following them. And if you made if you made mistakes, I always show the trade blotter for me. And sure enough, you're going to find some mistakes in here too, right? But I don't, if I make a mistake or if I'm wrong, I don't stay wrong for long. I get out of the trade, right? And then what I look to do is kind of just reassess, right? And that's what I did for a lot of this at the afternoon. So a couple things as always, when I see a lot of green on the screen, I take profits. I try to trade. I mentioned I try to trade in GE. I got one target in this one. It did not close where I wanted it to close, right? I like to see, big green candles for close. So we'll keep an eye on this one, and I think that's what a lot of what this week is about, is watching some of these results that come out and observing which ones are going to be strong and which could be potential leaders for the next quarter, right? But sometimes just watching and not doing anything is sometimes what I end up doing a lot of the time in this market, right? Because not every trade is going to set up. I tried Task. I note that it hadn't triggered yet. I did a little bit of a preemptive trade for Task because it's good to kind of go over ones that didn't work, right? I was looking for a movement above the 50-day moving average. As soon as I saw that I wasn't getting it, I abandoned the trade. That was around 10:19, and and then I started to kind of look at one of my favorite stocks that's been this year is INMD. We could kind of go over this one a little bit. Notice the finished green on the day, right? So again, you're going to see this out of some stocks for earnings, right? And some of them are going to set up for opportunities, right? Like this stock going down to 79, right? I just, have a little bit of faith in this company. They've had good guidance, good earnings, and I thought today was this move down, even though it wasn't that large of a move to the downside, which generally I don't want to see that big of a move to the downside, right? A big move to the downside indicates weakness, not strength, right? So a little bit of a move, sometimes that's all you're going to get for some of the super strong names, right? So this finished in the green. I thought that was a good sign for the company. I don't know. It looks like there was a little bit of selling here on the close, but here's how I trade this. I legged into some February 95 calls. I think I took a target and then I re-added that target, right, somewhere in here. Added back here. I've been in stock for a while on this name. Right? It's also in the TTG trend portfolio, but I've been in it in both accounts. So I got out of it a little bit towards the end of the day yesterday because you don't know what's going to happen on earnings, right? So I took some money off the table there with the unknown event. I tried some plug. When I saw that Tesla was strong for the day, I took that trade off too. Again, just wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. You'll hear me say that a lot. If it's not doing what I want it to do, I'm out of it. All right, here it is. Here's my exit. GDRX got out of this one. Again, not doing what I want it to do. Underperforming in a strong market. And out of that one. Nucor. I talked about the steel names yesterday, so I was looking for something in this space. I was actually looking for STLD, but STLD has a VPOC that's pretty close, right, up at 70, and I'm not sure what it's going to do. I think it takes out that VPOC, but I'm not sure what it does after that. Same thing for Nucor. I think Nucor can get up to about 118, 119. I think there's another VPOC up here on the 1-hour chart. There's a bunch there's two that were taken out. There's one at 117. So that's this area is what I'm aiming for this this trade. All right, so there's Nucor. I mentioned once GE got back to my purchase price, I got out of it. Then took multiple targets in INMD today, and then I got out of some trades. Right, some trades that it looked like there was some profit taking in the growth area, and a couple of these trades I've hit 3 or 4 profit targets. Right, and I'm holding the last portion of the trade. MDB, I hit one target yesterday. Again, it kind of fell back into the range, so I just decided to abandon it. Upstart, not doing what I wanted it to do. I wanted it to hold 337. Did come off the lows nicely for the day, but again, if it's not doing what I intended or what I was looking for it to do, I'm not going to argue with the price action. Right, I'm going to get out of some trades. All right. So again, today, you're going to have days like this happen where you decide to just, get out of some positions and watch a little bit. Here's what I said earlier for the day. Probably just a shakeout in the market. This is probably the best way to describe it. Probably just a shakeout in the market, rotation out of some high momentum growth areas. In my opinion, healthy to have them from time to time as sentiment has been building up. Nevertheless, I don't know that for sure, and unwound some risk after a huge market run that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, and we'll observe if the move down in some areas gets bought, right? And I kind of played along with that too. Asan, which this worked for me last week too, buying a little bit of the dip on this day, and then we rallied. Tried it again today, okay, and it held 123. And that's going to be the level that I'm watching for tomorrow. But notice, right? I did take some profits into the rebound from the lows, right? So it took 2 targets, and now I got the rest to deal with. Already have locked in some of that, okay? And then INMD too. CVS was a trade that I put on last week. Just liked what was going on in the managed care space. Keep in mind CVS and Aetna are together now. So that's it, guys. I think just going back to my my message up here, be reasonable and be realistic. And if you're playing in some of these high momentum names, make sure that you're taking targets. In my opinion, again, I'm not giving you advice. I'm not telling you what to do. But this is how I trade high momentum names. I take targets. I also make sure I really look at the volatility of the name, and how quickly you could, things can, if it changes for you. Like this name overnight, right? Everybody cheering about this thing going to like 50, 60 bucks in the overnight session, right? Nobody talking about how they managed it, right? Went up to 60 bucks. Well, that was where it top ticked, but it was above 50, right? It's back down to 22, right? This to me is not easy to manage, right? You got to be really quick. Now, if you took profits and you took profits yesterday, then congratulations. That's money. That's money to put in your pocket. So don't worry about, in my opinion, trying to get the absolute high, right? Because what would happen if this thing stayed around 50 or 55? People would be saying, oh, geez, well, I sold it yesterday, and look at the money I could have made. Well, look at what happened to it today. So when you're dealing with this high momentum stuff, anything could happen with this. And it doesn't require news. It doesn't require, something else. They could easily reverse just as this did in any case. So, it's about taking profits and putting money in your pocket. And if you want to sit with the last piece, have a stop on that price. The other thing I mentioned too, and I'll kind of leave it here just from a risk standpoint, because again, most of us who have been doing this for a long time, we're risk managers first and traders second. So if you've been adding a lot of names and if you got caught in some names, always make sure that you're putting a downside alert after you get into a name, right? One of the first things that people do sometimes is they put out their target, right, where they're going to get out of the name to the upside, right? But trades don't always work that way. You gotta put a downside alert on there too for risk management purposes. So that's it for today. Again, not an overall bad day, not as good as yesterday, but it is what it is. Right? We take it one day at a time. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow.